Welcome to episode 24 of the Library Tech Cast. Today we're going to be talking about should librarians learn to code. And we have a special guest today, Andromeda Yelton. We're going to sort of learn about how she fell into coding or came to be a coding librarian. My name is Jeff Sable. I am a librarian, academic librarian in Southern California. I'm switching jobs right now, so I'm sort of unemployed in a gray zone for a month ago, and I will be starting at Marymount, California University as the systems librarian. I'll throw it over to my co-host, Riley Childs. He'll introduce himself.
Hello there. My name is Riley Childs. I air from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am the library technology IT guy at Charlotte United Christian Academy, where I am also a high school student. I'm currently going through a massive laptop upgrade where we're crossing my fingers are going to get a big budget boost, which is going to let us do a whole bunch of fun educational technology stuff, get iPads, and I've seen them in action. They've actually improved a lot of stuff, and I know we've talked about that in the past. And if you've watched previous episodes, I've been bragging on like the LA School District, but the iPads that we do have actually helped. Once again, that's a whole nother debate. Let's not get into that. But I'm looking forward to the summer. I'm looking forward to my final year in high school. And I'm happy to be back. First episode back of the Library Tech Cast after our 2 months of hiatus. Before I butcher your name, let's move on to Miss Yelton.
Andromeda.
Andromeda. There we go. Okay. Go ahead.
So Andromeda, you want to give us a little background?
Yeah, I'm Andromeda Yelton. I live in Greater Boston. And I went to library school with the intention of being some kind of normal librarian, like reference or web services or something in academia. And then when I graduated, there were no normal jobs or really much of any jobs. So I had to get creative. I ended up working at a startup, Unglueit, which did, or still does, Creative Commons licensed ebooks and crowdfunds campaigns to support that. And I started out there doing outreach to the library community, communications and speaking and this, that, and the other. But then we kind of needed someone who could do web development, and the people who already knew how to code were busy writing backend. And I had sort of taken a C++ class in college in the 90s, which is totally like writing Python and a web app, right? So I did that because someone had to, and that's how startups work, and it was kind of fun. And then I realized along the way that the thing that really moves me is teaching librarians how to code. And so I quit my nice, stable startup job to be self-employed, where I do contract web development. I speak and write on library technology issues, and I teach librarians how to code. I'm on the boards of the Library Information Technology Association and the advisory board of the ADA initiative promoting women in open source and open culture. So basically I get really bored, and so I try to do a lot of things so that I don't get bored.
And so what would be your so this sort of all arose because when I went to library school, I only graduated about 3 years ago, and one of the first questions that they asked was, could the internet be anticipated? Could the changes that have consumed libraries for the past 10 years sort of could you have seen those 20 years ago? And my answer was, of course you could, if you were sort of gauging, how technology is going. I mean, there were quite a few predictions, but the common answer from the class was it was unpredictable. It was completely out of the blue. So that sort of says, in 20 years, I think, do all librarians need to code in 20 years? Or what, I mean, I feel that at least a basic understanding of like HTML and CSS is necessary for, even children librarians at this point. That's my stance.
Yeah.
Do you have a sort of a stance on that?
So in terms of predictions,
or an idea of how
in terms of predictions, I am not a futurist, and I do not try to predict the future. In part because I find that the most interesting part of the future to me isn't where the technology will evolve, but what the follow-on effects to society and culture and our lives and identities will be when we have new technologies. And I think people who are paying attention to technology may well have been in a position to predict the technological infrastructure of the internet. But predicting the social effects and the idea that there would be, large-scale e-commerce and 1 billion people on the social networking site and this, that, and the other, that's another thing entirely. And I stand with the quote that's variously attributed, but usually to Peter Drucker: the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's part of what interests me in teaching librarians to code, is I have no idea what the future is going to be. But I think it will be an awesomer future if more people and more diverse people are engaged in building it. And I think that the technologies that exist for librarians, which have become more and more integral to our workflow and our service models, those technologies are not going to be designed around library use cases unless librarians have a hand in designing them. And that may mean actually writing the code. That may mean getting enough code proficiency that you can speak lucidly to developers and work with them as partners. But the future that is invented needs to have librarians participating in inventing it, or we're going to keep having, aggregator platforms that make us want to stab ourselves and don't actually let us get ebooks into our patrons' hands, for instance.
Right. And I mean, that's a huge topic, I guess, in librarianship, is, the ownership of ebooks and being able to interlibrary loan them or lend them between libraries. But do you think that most librarians, or it's beneficial for all librarians to know some sort of code or some idea of how the back end works or the front end of a website works, where they can communicate their ideas? Maybe they're not going to be, I don't really see myself as actually writing, original code, but I mean, I'm interacting with it in a way that better serves the patron and better optimizes the time of the librarian, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and I think the ability to read and modify existing code, even if you're not writing from scratch, can give you a ton of opportunities, like you say, to maximize your own time and to spend it on things that only humans can do. Lane Wilkinson had this really great blog post a while back, a year or so now, on this topic of should all librarians learn to code. And he said no, but it might be good for all libraries to have that skill. And I think I am broadly with that if most libraries had that skill in-house, the capacity
of developer?
Maybe a developer, maybe someone like Jeff is saying, who can read and modify and hack and have an understanding of how to think computationally. I think having an in-house developer is not going to be a reasonable allocation of staff time and money for a lot of libraries, but having someone who has some of these skills is a different matter entirely. Should all librarians learn to code? No, probably not. I mean, I think all librarians would find ways to apply that skill usefully. I would like to see librarians from all areas of service learning how to code, so that the needs of all of those different service areas are represented in the technology we have in the future, and it's not just dominated like it is now by academic librarians. But we all have skills that if we had them, we would be more powerful and capable, and none of us have time to learn every single one of those, even though we would totally be better people if we did. So, I think every individual librarian has to make their own decisions as to where to allocate that time. But I do think it's good for people to be aware of what you can do with code, so that they're making that decision in an informed way.
Yeah, and I mean, like you were saying, if there's not somebody who can really speak or even like research products where they're sort of outsourcing all these services, you're never really going to be able to identify the services that may be the most cost effective, beneficial, and useful to your own library and your own situation. And I mean, I've seen that in at least one of the libraries I previously worked at where a sales agent is telling them one thing and it's practically impossible to really deliver on that promise, I guess. But I mean that's basically my point. I don't think you're going to have developers at every library, and I don't even think that's really feasible. But I do think that the more knowledgeable people are about technology, about coding, the more informed they will be, and the better they'll be able to serve their patrons. And I mean, when they talk about the fundamental duties of or tasks of a library, one is to help people find information. Maybe that will change on how we do that, but that's one of the fundamental services we offer to the public, where technology really changes the way we do that, but it also enhances it, I think.
Yeah, the ability to do that sort of evaluative function is one of the things that's really important to me. I keep coming back to this time in library school. I was taking a class on ILSs, and they were talking about next-gen catalogs and how spell check is this, like, cutting-edge, next-gen feature. And I'm going home. I have this big whiplash because I go to library school, and then I come home, and my husband is in software and normally works in startups, so it's all information professions, but it's very different kinds of conversations that I'm having in these environments. And I tell this to him, and he's like, but spell check is a sophomore year assignment. And I Googled it. And I discovered he's actually wrong. At Carnegie Mellon, it is a freshman computer science assignment. And that's not like your final project for the semester. That's like, this is a week. It is your homework assignment. And if we're getting sold something that a 17-year-old can write in a week as a cutting-edge feature that's supposed to move purchasing decisions, I think we need to be a little more informed. And I think we need to be holding vendors to a higher standard than that and saying, no, cutting-edge features technologically, they look like this. They don't look like this.
Like a crappy web interface that a vendor puts on top of a product and that says, look, we have Web 2.0, which happens so much.
I love Bootstrap. I'm teaching a session on Bootstrap at Annual. It makes things look great, but it can't and shouldn't cover up if your database isn't actually a database, for instance, or if, you don't actually have an API.
It shouldn't make ugly things on the back end prettier on the front end.
For example, yes.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the biggest obstacle in teaching librarians how to code that you've sort of encountered?
Well, I mean, you should weigh in because you were in one of my classes, and so you should tell me too. But
well,
I guess there's two things that really stand out. One is that many employers don't provide support, either in terms of money or in terms of time. So people are having to do this on their own, at the end of their workday, after whatever chores they need to do around the house. And you really can't learn an intellectually intensive skill that way. People need time to be productive at work. And the other thing is there's a ton of curriculum out there, but it's often fairly abstract and fairly mathematical in a way that I think the people writing it don't necessarily realize, because most people who do programming are very good at math. And most librarians do not have a strong math background, and most librarians don't want a really abstract theoretical programming course. They want something that they can use now on real-world problems. And
so like a code.org for adults is what you're saying, basically. Yeah. I know that sounds bad, but that's what you're describing.
I mean, it's not necessarily like, I don't want to say like something dumbed down necessarily. Although
I don't mean that.
Pretty
I mean,
and usable and fun is good, but
somewhere like have you seen the Python programming courses on Khan Academy?
I have looked at the beginning of them, but not for some time.
Like the really the older ones, like when they first started to do a coding section, were really the analytical things that you were describing, and they were billing them as, look, this is the great thing, you can teach this in schools, but it was just so analytical, and it's Python. It's I'm sure since you've looked at them, you know, but I mean, and they've sort of gotten it to the point where it's not necessarily a GUI, but it's a look at. You can mess around with the things, and then you basically in one column you have the code, and then the other column you have the result. Basically, it's you know what I mean. I think. And
but I mean, I do have to agree that learning something and not being able to apply it, that you do lose quite a bit. And I mean, I would also say support and time, from my library was my biggest, because I mean, I was teaching instruction, and I also was installing DSpace. So I mean, I was packed with time, and I don't think that my director necessarily realized how much time it's going to take to like install and configure it, and just the basics. And I mean, even myself, from reading the documentation and actually trying to install it, the stuff I learned, I mean, I feel like it was more a learning experience for me than it was beneficial even for the library to really install it and configure it. And I mean, now that I'm gone, I am not sure if they'll keep it up, because there's nobody else who really has those skills, or even one. I mean, I would even say if the building the want for them to sort of learn those skills is what I see is a real big obstacle, because they say, well, how is this useful? How can this help me become a better librarian? They don't see the direct correlation where, like you said before, they want to apply it directly right then. They want to say, what can I do now? And I mean, for myself, as an undergrad, I was an English major, and I have a master's in theology and then library science. So I'm definitely from the arts background, but I mean, I do see that I need to invest time in stuff that, in coding skills and understanding that may not directly translate to the foundation. And I guess relaying that idea of building a foundation is something that wasn't really conveyed to me, at least. Well.
Yeah, and that's...
Any thoughts, Riley?
Oh, yeah. And that's one of the things that everybody runs into. It's trying to convince your boss or your employer that this is a valuable thing to spend your time on. Trying to say, okay, so I've got... What is... Trying to show the gain before it happens. And I mean, and Jeff, I'm sure you've experienced that from this. I can only assume learning how to install these facing. Did you ever get that LDAP file thing figured out? I remember we talked about that, and I know you probably learned about that. Did you ever get that?
Yeah, they actually worked it out.
Yeah, and that's and that was one of the. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that was, that was one of the big.
I think it's hotel Wi-Fi.
Oh, is it? Am I? Yeah, just keep going between you guys. Then, I guess I'm cutting out.
Your Wi-Fi's glitchy a bit.
My apologies. I'm on the road.
Some internet's better than no internet. But yeah, and I mean, it's just a matter of trying to convince your employer that this job skill is valuable, this whatever is valuable, and that's always the difficulty with anything. And most people just don't, and a lot of people just don't see the value in it. Although it's a large community, it could be bigger, basically, And I'm sure your classes, and Miss Yelton, I'm just gonna say that, because I'm always gonna put your name. And I'm sure your classes are helping if that could be done on a grander scale, and be targeted at librarians. I mean, that would go ages, and just, yeah. I mean, but that's just like, I mean, not that it's never going to happen. It's just, it's a long way off. I
mean, that's like the background process that I'm always working on is how can I scale this idea up? Because there's lots of things, I've taught one-shot workshops or online classes or whatever, and it's part of the problem. But I really spent a lot of time thinking about, all right, there are 100,000 credentialed librarians in the United States, and if 10,000 of them knew how to code, even a bit, we'd be in a very different world. There's probably more like 1,000 who know how, just ballparking from the size of code for lib and so forth. So, you need to scale that up by a substantial factor. And I think, well, what sort of curriculum could I put together that would work for 100 people online? I think you have to start at 100. 10 is too different of a problem. But if I could do 100 and work out the kinks, I could scale that up to 1,000. And once you scale that up to 1,000, you're starting to stare down 10,000. So yeah, I spend a lot of time on that. And anyone who's listening who has ideas should talk to me.
And Riley, so you sent out your little thing where you were trying to pick your undergraduate major. What did you decide to go with, like a computer science, or are you still undecided?
I've computer science probably. I mean, that gives me the most options, and then I'm gonna try and get my MILS or whatever acronym library. I don't know. There's just so many different acronyms that are thrown about. Whatever is a graduate degree. Yeah, but someone sent me an email directly and suggested that I do crowdfunding to pay for college, and I was like, okay, I'll look into that. Yeah, but yeah, I'm looking at that. But I mean that's the thing. It's like so you go to college to be a librarian. But in that process, do you learn? And I mean, this is thinking about a traditional librarian and traditional job function. When they go to college, they don't necessarily. They go to library school, and the people. And not saying that the people that are teaching library school are necessarily out of date, but the curriculums just probably aren't really. Not. I don't know how to say this without offending anybody.
Library schools vary pretty significantly in the depth and breadth of their tech offerings and how central they are to the curriculum. It's very different at different schools, and there's no sort of like common experience. Even I was at Simmons, and even at Simmons, just the required intro tech course, different sections of it covered very different material, depending on the professor. So
it's more of an overview rather than a deep dive, you would say?
Yeah, I mean, at San Jose State, there was, you could have got into, Ajax serving language. I mean, either way you wanted to go. I mean, if you wanted to go the children's librarian route, you could, story time for 4 to 8-year-olds and story time from 8 to 12-year-olds, or you could have taken all programming classes with, basic HTML to Drupal to, I think they even now, I think I looked on there and now they're even looking at a Python class, and so I mean, the options are out there. It's just that you might see one of those classes opposed to 5 collection development classes, at least at San Jose State. And this was 3 years ago. I was there for 2 years, so you're looking at about 5 years ago when I started. But I mean, I think that especially in academia, they seem like they are seeing the benefits of providing those classes to library school students. And I mean, Code for Lib, you can see how many job announcements they send out each week, opposed to ALA has probably the similar amount of job listings, but I mean, and the difference is the Code for Lib ones all have some sort of technical aspect that you need to have, and I think that's really not only valuable, but there's a lot of positions or a lot of opportunities for growth and different positions within library. And I mean, speaking for myself, if I didn't have some sort of technical aptitude, and I mean mine was all self-taught or taking continuing education classes, I mean I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities since library school.
And I think that's part of, not necessarily the struggle, but part of it is that it's, so I guess I was just kind of misinformed when I was assuming that a library school is not necessarily outdated, but you know what I mean. But I mean, the struggle is, what about all so those 100,000 librarians? How many of those have been in their job for 10 plus years? Because
Quite a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And if you think about that, you take those, and those are the people that you're going to really, you have to try and get them to be able to code, because they're the people that don't know, that just don't have any idea.
Well, some of them do. I mean, there are people who are quite senior in libraries who know a lot of coding. But they didn't learn it in library school. It was not offered in library school when they were there.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So I think it's a problem where continuing education is going to have to be a major part of the solution, just because people have such varied backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so like there's a continuing, like it's called General Assembly. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's in Los Angeles, where they offer back-end web development, front-end web development, where it's not really an academic degree, but I mean it gets you right into those sort of fields with, you know, like a 12-week, 2-day-a-week course, or all weekends, Friday and Saturdays for, you know, 10 weeks. And I think that those really are filling the gaps. But anyways, their spiel is that even the best coders, you figure, are coming out of college right now, they have about 5 years experience. So if you start today, in 5 years, you'll basically have the same amount of experience as some of these people working for, you know, the top companies and sort of building things. So I mean, that's something that really made me optimistic. Of, you know, I'm almost middle aged, but I can still, you know, with 5 years, I can sort of gain these skills and really make a contribution.
That's one of the things that's, again, striking and whiplashy to me, going between libraries and software, is my husband and I are the same age, which makes me quite young in libraries and makes him very senior in software startups. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you're right. It's continuing education. It's getting it out there. No one's going to learn anything if they don't try and learn. It's trying to convince people that it's worth it.
Yeah, and I think as the future, you know, as our jobs become more and more dependent on technology, more. I mean, I just think it's inevitable that more librarians are going to embrace that and see, once they make the connection of, I can better serve my patrons or my students or whoever the population they're serving is. Maybe they're you know, they're inmates, I guess, if you're a prison librarian. But I mean, any way you see it, as long as they can make that connection, I think that it'll be sought out. And because I mean, the class you taught, there was quite a few people who took that class. And I mean, I was actually surprised to see so many people had signed up, and I really find just the community of everybody, seeing all the different people in different libraries coming out to, and like you said, most of it's on their own time, to really take the time and say, hey, this is beneficial not only, you know, to me and my job prospects, but to librarianship in general.
Well, the fact is, a tremendous amount of the service we do for our patrons is software already. And you know, that's in the front end when they're going to people's digital branches or what have you, and that's also in the back end when people are doing metadata, and all of the sort of library workflows are just incredibly dependent on the quality of our software. I'm working on a library technology report that should be out early next year sometime, and I'm talking to people about learning to code and relatively small code projects they've done and the impact. And you know, there are people who are like, our metadata workflow was broken, so I wrote a script that we run for a few minutes every week that now does stuff it used to take us an hour and a half every week to do. Like, oh, that would be better.
That would be awesome.
And again, like that hour and a half, what can you do as a human being to better serve your patrons wherever you are in the library? You know, whether you're directly or indirectly serving them. Like, what can you do with an extra hour and a half that computers can't?
It's all.
Oh, go ahead, Riley.
Oh, it's all about figuring out what you can do to perform the job that computers can't do, and you've said that multiple times. But I mean, that's kind of the whole goal of everything. It's about being able to have because librarians shouldn't be spending all their time working at a computer trying to perform a job. You should be trying to figure out what you can get the computer to do for you.
Right. It's a tool. It's not a black box.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be our robot army of servants, not our robot army of overlords. You know, it's a crucial distinction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess that's all I have. You wanna wrap it up now, Riley, or you have any other questions for Andromeda?
Andromeda, there. Now I'm finally
Awesome.
gonna get
Yeah.
at the end of the episode. So what projects are you working on right now?
Right now. So I'm writing this library technology report, like I mentioned, which basically involves interviewing people who have written short, like sub-100 lines of programs and talking to them about their impact and what they learned. So if anyone listening to this is a librarian who has such a thing, wherever you work in libraries, whatever kind of library you work in, I would love to talk to you. I'm preparing for ALA because being on the leaderboard, that's kind of like looming large on the horizon. I have a lot of meetings to go to in a week and a half in Vegas. I do a lot of software contracting for my friend's startup, Custom Fit, which produces bespoke knitting patterns. So knitters are very frustrated at having to do all this math to make sweaters that they are personally knitting actually fit them because patterns aren't based on real people. So this is basically a web app that does that for you. It takes information about what you want to make and it gives you the pattern and then you can make it and it's gorgeous. So I do a lot of Python Django stuff for them, making Heroku do what I wanted to do. Wow, I'm trying to think through what else is on my gargantuan to-do list. I'm going to be teaching a Introduction to Programming Concept through jQuery course August 10th and 11th, maybe 11th and 12th, in DC. There's a Code for Lebanon conference. They're both right before SAA, so we're doing this newbie coder, advanced coder, all party together thing. So people should sign up for that. It's at George Washington University. Got some other teaching options sort of on the horizon I'm working on. Yeah.
Cool, very cool.
Got a lot on your plate.
Like I said, I don't like boredom. Really don't like boredom.
So, Jeff, do you have anything? What's going on? I know you have that job.
So I am off for the next few weeks. Where I volunteer actually at St. Joseph's, I am helping them design a new database for patient intake. But that's mainly working with a vendor and sort of telling them what we need, or helping the charity tell them what they need, and following all the protocol because they are taking Social Security numbers and birth dates and stuff like that. So I will be working on that probably at least a couple days a week, and just getting ready for my new position at Marymount University of California, and I will. They actually use all OCLC products for their ILS, so I am excited to get my hands on the back end of that and sort of look and see how much you can customize it and how it all works. And I'm going to probably go to a few webinars on their API and stuff like that.
Sounds awesome.
So exciting stuff. Excited. Yeah. What about yourself, Riley?
Well, it's the summer. I work at a country club snack bar. I'm pretty lame. At my school, a significant Mondays and Thursdays every week, so that's fun. And
so what are you doing there at your school? What are you doing at your school on Mondays and Thursdays?
I'm trying to get our library done. I'm trying to catalog 8,000 books all by myself.
Oh,
yeah, I know. It's scary. It's me and my dad, never, totally self-taught, which is even worse because we weren't doing it right for the first 3,000. Yeah, I know. It's painful.
Is it a thing where you can write a script to automatically fix most of those 3,000, or are you?
Yeah, actually, I wrote my own integrated library system.
Oh my gosh.
But then I realized I did a really bad job, so I went to Koa. So now I'm trying to write. I'm working on that script to do that, so that I don't have to do all those 3,000 books again. But it's going good. I'm actually about to migrate all my web server to Nginx on everything, so I'm just trying to learn about that just for funsies, you know. And I am. This time next year, I'm launching an online website to do swim team management. So I've got a lot on my plate as well, and I've got my hands in a lot of different pies. Yeah, but I mean, you guys are doing it probably a lot more serious because it affects a lot more people, thousands versus hundreds. But yeah, so on the Library TechCast side, I just want to, if you're watching or listening or anytime, if you go to our wiki, you'll notice there's a big notice on there that says, sorry, the wiki's down. We got a lot of spam. A lot of really weird Chinese messages were on there, a lot of weird pages. So, and I just don't have time to clean it up right now, so it's just kind of down because, you know, those people that they pay to hack those captchas, those fun people. But yeah, so yeah, that's it for the Library TechCast. So you can find us on Twitter. We're at Library TechCast. Our website is librarytechcast.com. Find us on iTunes. Just search for Library TechCast. Find our website. Oh, I already said that. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that's it. So,
and a big thanks to Andromeda for being our guest today. It's awesome talking to her, and she's real insightful, insightful comments, and yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So, oh yeah, Andromeda. So where can we find you?
You can find me at AndromedaYelton.com and on Twitter at ThatAndromeda.
Okay.
Or, at pretty much any LIDA event in Vegas if you're going to be at ALA Annual next week.
Okay. And Jeff, where can people find you?
I'm at jeffreystevensable.org, and I'm on Twitter at LA Libraryman. So yeah, hit me up at either of those places. And always, you contact me through the Library TechCast. We're always looking for new and exciting guests. And if you have any ideas on coding for librarians, we'd love to hear them.
And as always, you can find me at @RowdyChildren on Twitter and RileyChilds.net. So just for the Library TechCast, I'm Riley Childs.
I'm Jeff Sable. Have a nice day.